My name is Ethan Walker, and for 7 years, I gave everything I had to the company I work for in Portland. I started as a junior analyst, worked my way up through every department, stayed late when nobody asked me to, and quietly built a reputation as the person who could be trusted to get things done right. I never chased credit. I just did the work and let it speak for itself. My supervisor was a man named Marcus Reed, someone everyone in the office admired as a dependable leader who inspired loyalty in his team. What none of them knew was that I carried a secret that could unravel the polished reputation he had spent years carefully building. Several years earlier, while volunteering during a company-sponsored charity event, I met an elderly retired teacher named Margaret Reed, who never mentioned that she was Marcus's aunt, but quietly admitted she was close to losing her home after unexpected medical expenses exhausted her savings. Without revealing my identity or expecting recognition, I created a private educational assistance trust through a local nonprofit that anonymously covered Margaret's housing costs, rehabilitation bills, and daily living expenses, allowing her to remain in the neighborhood she loved while believing that a generous community foundation had selected her case. Marcus eventually discovered that an anonymous organization was paying his aunt's expenses, yet instead of searching for the truth, he proudly allowed relatives, co-workers, and business associates to assume that he had personally stepped in to rescue his struggling family member during difficult times. Every holiday gathering and corporate fundraiser became another opportunity for him to receive admiration for sacrifices he had never actually made. I quietly watched him accept compliments that should never have belonged to him, convincing myself that protecting Margaret's peace mattered more than correcting the false impression. Then came the day the executive position I had spent 7 relentless years earning was instead awarded to an outside candidate who had barely learned the company's systems. Marcus sat across from me in the conference room overlooking the rain-soaked skyline and calmly informed me of the decision. Instead of arguing, I simply smiled, thanked him for the opportunity, and walked out with quiet dignity. The day after losing the promotion, I contacted the nonprofit and explained that my anonymous sponsorship would conclude at the end of the current funding cycle because my personal priorities had changed, carefully ensuring that Margaret would receive advance notice along with guidance about alternative assistance programs. I felt genuine sadness about ending the support. Yet I also realized that continuing to finance a lie that elevated someone who constantly diminished my own work was no longer an act of kindness, but an unhealthy sacrifice that prevented everyone involved from facing reality. Within days, Marcus's carefully managed world began to crack as his relatives questioned unexpected invoices. Community volunteers asked why the long-running sponsorship had ended, and Margaret innocently wondered why the nephew she constantly praised seemed confused about financial arrangements he supposedly handled himself. During one tense afternoon at the office, Marcus privately confronted me after piecing together the unusual timing, and although his voice trembled with panic, I calmly replied that true generosity never demanded applause. Genuine leadership never depended on taking credit for another person's effort, and the conversation forced him to confront uncomfortable truths he had avoided for years because he realized his career had been strengthened not only by my overlooked ideas, but also by the silent compassion I had extended toward his own family without asking for a single favor in return. Instead of shouting or making threats, he lowered his head and admitted that every compliment he had accepted for his supposed devotion now felt painfully hollow. I quietly explained that integrity loses its value the moment recognition becomes more important than honesty. News of Marcus's emotional confession eventually reached senior executives after several employees independently reported that I had long been responsible for innovations and successful projects that had routinely been credited to someone else, prompting an internal review of leadership practices throughout the organization. The investigation uncovered years of overlooked contributions from multiple staff members, leading the company to restructure its management team, promote transparency and project recognition, and invite me to lead a newly created division focused on ethical leadership and employee development. For accepting the offer, I visited Margaret, who had finally learned the identity of the anonymous supporter whose generosity had protected her independence for so many years. She embraced me with grateful tears instead of resentment. She admitted that while Marcus had made serious mistakes, she hoped he would rebuild his life through honesty rather than pride. I left that visit understanding that real justice is not measured by another person's downfall, but by choosing compassion without allowing yourself to be taken for granted. I accepted the leadership position with one condition: that every major project would publicly recognize the people who truly contributed to its success, ensuring that future employees would never experience the same quiet invisibility I had endured for so long. Marcus resigned and eventually began rebuilding both his career and his family relationships with far greater humility than before. The experience taught everyone involved that kindness should never become permission for exploitation. Honesty remains the strongest foundation for lasting respect, and genuine character is revealed not when life is easy, but when difficult choices demand integrity over appearances. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you. A month after accepting my new leadership role, I introduced a company-wide policy requiring every major project to include written documentation, identifying the contributions of every team member involved, making it impossible for managers to quietly claim someone else's work as their own. Although a few senior employees resisted the changes at first, younger staff members quickly embraced the new culture because they finally believed their effort, creativity, and dedication will receive the recognition they had earned. The leadership workshops I organized became some of the highest-rated programs in the company's history because I focused less on profits and more on trust, accountability, and respect between managers and employees. Instead of giving long motivational speeches, I shared practical examples showing how honesty created stronger teams, inspired innovation, and prevented the kind of silent resentment that had nearly destroyed both careers and personal relationships. Several months later, Marcus unexpectedly requested a private meeting with me at a quiet cafe across town, explaining that he wanted to apologize without expecting forgiveness or professional favors in return. Looking noticeably humbler than the confident executive I once knew, he admitted that losing his reputation had forced him to examine years of insecurity, and for the first time in his life, he understood how much damage pride could cause when left unchecked. I listened patiently before thanking him for taking responsibility, but gently explained that trust could not be rebuilt through words alone because lasting change required consistent actions over time. Marcus accepted my response without argument, promising that wherever his career took him next, he would earn respect through honesty rather than authority. He quietly left with a sense of determination instead of bitterness. Margaret's health gradually improved as she became active in local community programs, where she began mentoring retired teachers who struggled with loneliness after leaving their professions. Inspired by what I had done for her, she started a volunteer initiative that connected successful professionals with elderly residents needing companionship, proving that even one quiet act of kindness could create a ripple effect touching hundreds of lives. The company's annual shareholder meeting brought another surprise when the board publicly recognized me for transforming workplace culture and dramatically improving employee retention, productivity, and client satisfaction within my first year as department head. Standing on the stage, I accepted the award with gratitude, but insisted that the achievement belonged to every employee who had chosen collaboration over competition and integrity over personal glory. Outside the office, I quietly established a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in business ethics and organizational leadership, hoping future generations would enter the corporate world with stronger values than many leaders of the past. I deliberately kept my name off every brochure and announcement because I believed generosity carried greater meaning when it was motivated by compassion instead of public recognition. Years later, one of the scholarship recipients joined the same company as a management trainee and surprised me by explaining that the anonymous program had completely changed his family's future after his father lost his job during difficult economic times. Hearing his story reminded me that the greatest investments were not measured in money alone, but in the opportunities created for people who might otherwise never receive a chance. As the years passed, the company became known throughout the industry for its transparent leadership practices and respectful workplace culture, attracting talented professionals from across the country who wanted to build careers in an environment where fairness truly mattered. Competitors frequently tried to understand the secret behind the company's remarkable success, but the answer had always been surprisingly simple. People perform their best when they know honesty is valued more than politics. Looking back on everything I had experienced, I realized that the promotion I once believed would define my success had actually been far less important than the person I had become through hardship, patience, and unwavering integrity.